had a nice little hit during worship, which was so wonderful um, this Christmas season. I was standing back by the Christmas tree over there, and there was a mom who I think is over at the kind of the resource room area dropping off the kids for Sunday school, but she was holding her little infant daughter. She was looking back over her shoulder, and we had a nice eye-to-eye contact, smiling back and forth at each other. That doesn't always happen, you know? You don't always get a smile when you lock eyes with a young infant. And Brother Gilbert, where's Brother Gilbert? Is he in here still? He walked behind me, and I heard him say, "Oh, you have that kind of effect too, huh?" And I just looked at him, and he said, you know, it's funny. I guess he dresses up as Santa. Gilbert dresses up as Santa Claus, and he goes to these, I think he said a place where there are kids with needs, special needs. And he said there was one child that looked at him in the Santa costume and just bursted out in tears, screaming like crazy. And then he had later taken off his Santa outfit, and she saw him and had a big smile, and they hit it off. And I told him I thought it would have been the other way around. But it's something, this idea of what we look at, how we look at it, is kind of what I would like to focus on this morning. The task I was given was to kind of find something to share that had something to do with the birth of Jesus and spectrum of the stories that we know about this amazing part of our Christian faith. Likely, like you, every year I have a number of things that I bring out to put up as Christmas decorations, and we've accomplished that already, and they look pretty nice. One thing that comes out every year is an inherited nativity scene that I think my parents actually purchased. It's a nice one. It's small. It actually fits in the box of an old Black & Decker skill saw. I pull it out, and it's got the figurines from, I believe they were made in Italy. And it comes out, and it goes on top of the fireplace mantle. Well, I got up on Saturday morning and went through my morning ritual, but I stopped and I looked at the nativity set, and the nativity set includes the shepherds, and it's got the three wise men. But what I noticed is that they were all looking out towards me, and there's something wrong with that picture. And so I took a moment and I turned them around to make sure that they were looking at what was the center of attention, was the baby Jesus. And it is a beautiful part of the Christmas story that we get from Scripture. We have the beauty of the Magi, these three men, these learned men from the East who traveled a great distance to see and worship Jesus. And they followed a star. They followed a star in the sky to Bethlehem, where they found Jesus in this house, manger, a cave. They gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The Magi's visit, it's commemorated in some liturgical churches and known as the Feast of the Epiphany. Don't need to go into a lot of historical detail, but it's believed that this visit happened actually quite some time after the birth of Jesus. But it does say a lot about what stirred up in some people's lives and what they heard about and what they wanted to see. the shepherds. The story about the shepherds is a beautiful one. It's one about the visit of an angel to the lowly shepherds, as Luke tells us, as they were taking care of their flocks in the possibly cold evening air. And the angel appeared to them and told them what was happening right in the midst of their world. And they indeed went to go see the baby Jesus. And they found him. They did, in a feed box in Bethlehem. And each of them that came to see and look for the baby Jesus left and went to share with their world what they had seen. On Saturday, after I had turned the attention of the small figurines towards their rightful gaze, I went back and I sat down and I opened the newspaper, as I always do, mostly on a Saturday morning. And there on the front page was an obituary. And the obituary had a story about someone named the hangman, a man named Shalom Nagar, who died the end of last month. He was an executioner. His identity, it was kept secret for 3 decades after the execution, because he was the man chosen to hang a man named Adolf Eichmann. He was the fugitive Nazi, a war criminal, convicted of crimes against humanity and genocide in the murder of 6 million Jews. Nagar served in the Israel Defense Forces, and he spent 6 months watching Eichmann as he sat in his cell in the Ramla prison before his execution, often staring at him for hours at a time. As the execution approached, Nagar's commanding officer asked several guards if they'd be willing to perform the task. Nagar was the only one who declined. But then, his commanding officer took time to show him images of the atrocities that occurred at the hand of this man Eichmann. Picture after picture. Shalom, his eyes gazed upon the horrors that he saw in front of him. And it was at that time that he decided that he would no longer decline. And so for those soldiers that were a part of the watch of this man Eichmann, they drew straws. And indeed it was Shalom Nagar who drew the straw that asked of him to pull the lever. Nagar was so shaken by what he saw that he agreed to do whatever it took. And now came the moment. He was looking Eichmann in the eye when he placed the noose over his neck. And then he pulled the lever. And this was his quote: "Just seeing him made me sick. I'd never seen a man hanged. I was just a kid. What did I know?" What a juxtaposition to talk about the beauty of Magi and the shepherds who in their spirit were moved to see God born in the form of a baby boy named Jesus. And then to think about this man who was born an orphan on the streets of Yemen, who made his way to Israel and was the one chosen to look in the man's eyes who created such horrible acts against humanity. What do we look for? What do we look at? It's not too hard to see hard things in life. On that same front page of the paper was an article about what experts say we as parents and leaders should do with teenagers who have so much access to porn. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous on the phone. We know what's out there. And this article was an attempt to tell us that putting our head in the sand is not a good choice, that there is something beneficial to recognizing what the youth of our society are looking at, and indeed what many of us here might be caught looking at. In the paper today, again on the front page, an article about how much violence is exasperated on our high school campuses because of the fact that when a brawl breaks out, every kid on campus runs to get there and have their camera out to take a video and post it on platforms that have been created especially to show violence on high school campuses. The front page of the paper, 2 days in a row, about what we look at and what we should do about it. We live in a difficult world. But don't we know there's really nothing new about this? I went to Dana Middle School, and every Friday there was a big fight after school. That ain't nothing new. It's what I watched and participated in. But there's a lot more opportunity, isn't there, to watch and see the dark side of the world that we live in. It's everywhere around us. We know that politically we are in difficult and tense times. What are we going to look at? Some have said the beginnings of World War III, and we might be in the midst of it as things in South Korea develop, as Syria becomes unhinged. The partnerships that are being created in our world can be quite intimidating and scary.
All right.
What are we to look at?
All right.
But is it anything new? How do we shake this? Is it out there? Or is it something inside of us? Can we shake it? Haven't we lived long enough to know that it's inside of us, and it is in fact very hard to shake the way we see things and the things that we're drawn to and what we look at? Doesn't it seem sometimes that instinctual impulse has won over our ability to stay focused and true at what we pay attention to? It's in our bodies, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can't we control them? Can we? A gentleman, an author, a Japanese author named Haruki Murakami said this about our bodies. Human beings are ultimately nothing but carriers, passageways for genes. They ride us into the ground like racehorses from generation to generation. Genes don't think about what constitutes good or evil. They don't care whether we are happy or unhappy. We're just means to an end for them. The only thing they think about is what is most efficient for them. Can we control that? Is it in us or is it outside of us? What we see, I believe, is defined in large part by what we look for and expect to see. What are we looking for? There's been some scientific experiments that are really fascinating. One of which was an attempt to take a group of individuals and put them in an experiment where they were to have makeup put on their face that would create somewhat of a grotesque scar. And so there was a professional makeup artist who was brought in and began to create these scars on these individual faces. And they went to go look in the mirror and they saw this scar and they could see the grotesqueness in it. And then the makeup artist would bring them back and make sure that they put moisturizer on the face in order for the scar not to dry out. And then they were asked to sit down with other individuals that were a part of this study. And what they were asked to do was to make a mental note of what their experience was like, knowing that they had this deformity on their face. And they were asked to perceive what was going to be a part of that interaction. And each and every one of them, when they were done, talked about the fact that they felt that there was an intensity and a patronizing relationship that had occurred between them and the people that they were talking with. Every one of them. After the interviews had taken place, they were sat down, and each of those individuals who had been given a scar on their face were then made aware of the fact that when the moisturizer was put on the scar, the makeup artist had actually taken the scar away. And so when the individual was sitting apart from on the other side of the individual they were talking with, there was no scar. But it was the perception. It was the perception that they had had this grotesque piece on their face that had created an image of something that had actually not even been there. It was from the inside. What are we looking at? There's another amazing study. Maybe you've seen this, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to give it away. But they asked subjects in a room where there are a group of people, and that group of people are given the task to take a ball and to pass it from one to another randomly. And the subject is asked to focus intently and count how many times is that ball being passed to another individual. And so the subject sits there and he watches the ball move and he counts each time that it's passed from one set of hands to the other. And he gives the number. and the numbers written down. And the numbers are pretty consistent. But then they are asked, did you by chance see the person dressed in a gorilla outfit that walked through right in the midst of the passing? Almost unanimously, none of them see the gorilla. I watched it myself. I didn't see the gorilla. But when I watched it again, there's that monkey walking right on by. It says a lot about the way we look at things, that the perception that we have often is within what we are looking for, what we are anticipating. There's a great story about a construction worker who jumps off the ledge of where he's working and lands on his feet, and a 10-inch nail goes right through his boot and comes out the other end. And he screams in agony. And then he sits down, and the boot is carefully taken off his foot. And what's realized is that the nail went right between the toes, never pierced his skin. But in fact, it was the image that he saw that created the trauma and the shock. These are true facts. What are we looking for? What is in us? What is our point of view? That's a good question for us to reflect on. Do you see what I see? That's a very relevant Christmas song. Do you hear what I hear is what it's called. Do you see what I see? A star that was written with lyrics loosely related to the two epiphanies, the two stories, nativity stories that we have in Matthew and Luke. Each of those stories combined for someone who wrote these lyrics at a time when there was a crisis in our world called the Cuban Missile Crisis. The person who wrote that song knew about this crisis in our society and was walking down the streets of New York City and saw infants being passed by in their little strollers. And when he saw them look at each other, it dawned on him that there was a way of looking at things that made a difference. And so he wrote this as an attempt to deal with the crisis in saying that there's another way of looking at the world, and can we look at it with peace? Do you see what I see? What did the angel tell the shepherds to go look for? What did the Magi go and look for? During this Christmas season, we hear about these stories of incredible wonder. What must it have been like to be in the presence of the baby Jesus? How wonderful could that have been? If we took a moment and just reflected on what that must have been like. How many of us have been privileged to be in the presence of wonder? As a very young man, I will never forget, for me, which were moments of wonder. For I would drive from my parents' home down Torrance Boulevard to Jameson Avenue, and I would turn right into what I would later learn to be the heart of Keystone. And way back before these great pastors that we have now, Josh and Koba, before they became the men that they are, I had the privilege of walking into the backyard on Jameson Avenue where Pastor Isaac and Pastor Retha were growing a new family. And before they had that big, nice swimming pool, there was a fire ring back there. And we would have these wonderful fireside chats, just he and I. Precious moments I'm a privileged young man because none of you will have that opportunity because there's a big swimming pool back there now. But no, he's got too many grandchildren, too many children around him. You won't get that kind of time. Too bad for you, but I had it. And I prize those moments because they were wonderful to me. I had the privilege of driving with this man up and down the Harbor Freeway as we made our way to Fuller Seminary where he taught and I was a student. Those were wonderful moments for me, full of wonder, that have so much become a part of who I am and what I have become. And I will always be indebted for the time that that man poured into my life. Maybe you have a moment right now where you can think about moments where you've been privileged to be in the place of wonder, where you've had a man or a woman, a leader, something that you've been able to be surrounded by, and it's just flowed over you and you've been in awe. You've been changed. A sporting event, a music event. Those are such wonderful moments. Do you see what I see? It's sometimes hard to find those. I've had a couple of visits to places like the Getty. I've been in a few museums. Some of you have been in some that I would love to get to someday. But you know what it's like. Or please take a moment to think about what it could be like to walk into a museum and stand in front of a masterpiece and to see the effects of what that masterpiece and how it was created, the brush strokes, the way the layers of the paints fall on the canvas, the expansiveness of an individual's dream and vision put in front of you for the world to see. To be in that presence and let it wash over you is an amazing, wonderful experience, isn't it? And now think about the fact that sometimes now we have to settle for looking at them on small digital screens. Thankfully, we have them. But my gosh, do you realize how different it is to be in the presence of a masterpiece? To see it flow over you, to be able to see its expansiveness and the difference between that and looking at it on a small digital screen? We can't fool ourselves. Do you see what I see? Are we ready to see what actually is a part of this incredible story? For we are on the other side of the nativity scene, are we not? I don't want to go too far into the future, but it's in me and it's in you. Because we know the story of Jesus. And it doesn't end at the nativity scene. A couple of nights ago, the only ones home were my youngest daughter, Sophia, and myself. And she's 18. And I asked her, I said, hey, do you want to try to find a Christmas movie? And I was surprised. She said yes. There's not too many things that we have in common when it comes into TV entertainment. I don't know too much about these Asian teenage shows and movies that she watches. I'm not interested. the only thing that we've had in common are maybe some women's soccer games. So I said, hey, let's look for a Christmas movie. And she said, okay. And I found one I had not seen before. It's called Klaus. Anybody seen that movie? Thank you, Pastor. Now I have a problem because I could tell you about it and I wouldn't give nothing away. But if I tell them about it, man, I'm going to give it away to you. So I'm going to try to be respectful. I think it's an incredible movie. It's a digital Christmas story that was nominated for an Academy Award. And me and my daughter sat there and watched it together, the whole thing. And I think she only looked at her cell phone twice. And I only looked at mine 3 times. There's a very privileged young man who comes from a very wealthy family, probably in some European country, and he's living off his parents' means. Oh, he's got it good. He's a good-for-nothing guy. He's done nothing in his life. And all he's doing is trying to get through, finding some way to make use of all this privilege in order to get through and move on with his life. But his dad, who has given him chance after chance to prove himself, has finally said, okay, now you've had it. Now you're going to be sent off into some type of northern European land, an island far away. And this family, I guess, was some kind of postal empire. They had a monopoly on it. And so his task was going to be to develop a postal system and bring it to life on this faraway, cold, forsaken, frigid island. And he showed up, and it was gray. Oh, the snow and the ice was dead, and it was gray, and it was dark, and he had no idea what he got himself into. But somehow he mustered up enough energy to say, okay, I'm going to make it work because I want to get out of here. And so he started to do things, and he found this man named Klaus, and they combined together to start to do things for the little kids that had been neglected and had become sucked into this dark, dank death of a vacuum in this winter darkness. And what was interesting, as life began to flow into it, the true story about that land began to emerge. And the true story that began to emerge was the fact that it was so dark and so oriented towards death because there were 2 primary clans that did nothing but try to kill each other and to destroy each other. And that all they did was find ways to hammer upon each other. And what was interesting was that when the life began to emerge and things started to change, the enemies didn't like it. And they joined together to fight against the good. Isn't it true that the nativity scene, where we see the wonder of the beginning of the change in the universe, that it's almost at the same time where death is knocking at the door, where there is a king who wants to find out where this wonder is located and decides to kill off anything he can in order to remain in power. Do you see what I see? I think I heard someone sing it. And I'm glad I still have eyes that see things, see beautiful things. I had this real hard assignment to be able to do the work that I do, and that was I had to go do a residency year in the state of Hawaii. It was quite a sacrifice to go to Honolulu and work in such a difficult setting. One day after work, Kapiolani Women's and Children's Medical Center, right on Punahou, next to H1, I would leave work and I would walk north on Punahou. And as I was walking this day on Punahou, I was on the east side of the street, and my eyes caught a glimpse of a young lady who was on the west side of Punahou. And my eyes saw something really beautiful. And so my eyes somehow caused my feet to cross the street as soon as I was safely able to. And my eyes realized that I was right behind the beauty that I saw. And when I got to this corner of Makiki and Wilder, we happened to hit a red light at the very same time. And what my eyes beheld began to start a conversation with this young lady that ended up becoming my wife. Do you see what I see? I don't know what your eyes have caught in life, but I could tell a little bit of story. And, I don't know how to preach like this. I don't do it as often as our real good pastor here does. I'm looking at my time, so I'm thinking, how many things can I fill in to talk about catching eyesight with someone? And I'm going to tell this one because I got some time, but it's a fun one in my life, and maybe you'll get the spirit of it. I hope that what I'm saying here is give you a chance to remember the things that you've seen in life. And I remember my oldest daughter badly wanting to be on the volleyball team at Torrance High School. Badly did she want to be on the volleyball team at Torrance High School. And she played. Sure enough, she played. She played in the city leagues. She put in her time. She was committed to making practices. She was all in. But she had heard how difficult it was to be in a position where you have to try out for a team, because in the city you don't try out. You pay the money and you sign up and you're on the team. Well, this was the first time she was going to be under the spotlight and have to be watched for whether or not she would make it. And I had heard her talk about it. I knew when the tryouts were coming, and thankfully my schedule aligned in such a way where I knew I could be at the gym when the day came where she was going to find out, after the weeks of trying out was going to come to the conclusion. And I thought, thank God I can be there. And I either get to be prepared to celebrate, or I get to be prepared to provide spiritual care. And so I got there, and the girls were practicing and the boys were practicing, and the gym was very busy. And I found my way to a corner in which I could see where she was wrapping up, and I knew she couldn't see me because of where I was. And the coach brought all the girls together, and I saw them huddled together. And then what I saw was they all ran out of the gym. And they all ran out of the gym because I later learned the coach had said, you go outside, and on the post, there will be a list of the players who've made the team, and there will be a list of players who have not made the team. And if you didn't make the team, just take your stuff and go, cuss me out, do whatever you want, but you can't come in here. And if you've made the team, come back in. And so I didn't know, but I looked and I watched. The girls were out there, and you could see some were jumping up and down. Some put their head in their hand, and they were crying in tears, and they were leaning on each other's shoulders. I couldn't see her. I couldn't see where she was. I couldn't tell which of those two camps she had fallen in. And the group that had made it began to make their way back into the gym. And I couldn't see. I was watching. And the group kind of made their way back to the center of the gym. And there I was now standing at the wall looking. And all of a sudden, out of that group came my daughter running with her eyes fixed on mine, running towards me. And she leaped and jumped into my arms in joy and glee. She had made the team. Do you see what I see? We'll leave that. Boy, I'll tell you, the beauty that I saw across the street on Punahou, that I ended up meeting up at the same corner, and we had a conversation that developed based on a lot of shared realities that we learned really quickly. And a very short period of time, within 3 months, I asked this young lady to marry me, and she said yes. And if not, that was fine, because I was leaving to fly back to LA anyway, and I wouldn't see her again. But she said yes. And you know, it's almost 29 plus years later. I can tell you that the eyes that I looked at her with, she looks different than she did back then. My eyes and the beauty that I saw, that beauty's changed. My eyes and the way I look aren't the same way. That love has evolved and gone through a lot of war stories. We've had knockdown, drag-out fights. We've made each other so mad at each other. We've hurt each other. We've done things to each other that have made life very difficult. The way I see her is different now. It's a different kind of love. That young 15-year-old girl who jumped in my arms with such joy because she made the team. Oh, we've gone through some hard times. And I'm not going to put her dirty laundry out here for you. That's not my business. But we've gone through some hard times. I'm all three of my kids. Oh my gosh. You know what it's like. It's a hard job. And the way you look at those little babies when they're born, do you have any idea what's in store for you? I didn't. Oh my gosh. Do you see what I see? This Epiphany story. What are we looking for? What kind of people are we? What are we asked to look for? Can we look for the wonder? Can we have the spirit of the shepherds and the magi who come looking for the wonder and see new life, see generative within us, the birth that comes from knowing Jesus loves us? Do you see what I see? I've seen it. It's beautiful. But I don't always see that. Sometimes I don't know what to look for. And sometimes when I look for it, I can't find it. I don't know about you. I don't even know what I'm asking of you, except maybe to take a moment and to think about what you're looking for in life. What do these scenes teach us? What does our faith teach us? I do think there's something about a maturity that comes from having a marriage that develops over years, and you learning how to forgive and work things out and look the other way and not have everything met by what you think should be taken care of, and not by trying to take care of everything you think you should be doing, and recognizing that a lot of what we look for is something, a part of the brokenness that we live in, and that our vision isn't always necessarily the purest and the cleanest, for we do see things in a way that we have to realize won't be fully realized until we are in that time of eternity where we see things in full and in complete technicolor. And so what kind of eyes are we asked to have as men and women of faith? Let me give you some examples that I find that are here in black and white. Psalm 146 verse 8 says, "The Lord gives sight to the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous." If you are blind, this psalm says that you will be given sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, "For we live by faith, not by sight." Can you and I see that way? Can we live by faith? When Christmas may be dark for you and it's not a time of wonder, if it may get you caught up in those depressive moments when you realize what you've lost in life or what you wish were the case that you lived in the Christmas season, can you live by faith? Please, God, let that be so. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. This means that faith is a confident expectation of what we hope for, even when we cannot physically see it. It's a hard, simple question that I'm going to end with. If you can't see what you really want, can you and I really live with the faith to keep looking? To have that wonder inside? To live with that wonder? I pray that by the grace of God, we have a good answer for that. We're going to close in prayer. With your Spirit, God, here in our presence, with the spirit of the season that you've given to us as a gift, for the anticipation of the incredible celebration we're going to have, for the beauty of being together as a church and knowing that you've given us a story that has so much wonder, that has so much awe, that has the angels singing and the shepherds clamoring through the rocks and the cliffs to scramble to see the baby Jesus, that has given a hunger for the Magi to know that they come from a different culture. They come as learned men, but they're humbled in knowing that they have been told that there is a child, a Christ child, that has been born into a deep and dark world. And that if they journey, they will indeed see with their own eyes. And that we've been given these stories that live within us. And that it is those stories and the truth that those stories become alive when we have opened up our heart to you in our most vulnerable, broken moments. That the truth of these stories become alive in us. and allow us to know what we can look for. And though we may not see exactly what we wished we could see, that you have given us an incredible gift of faith, and that it is by that faith and the sheer trust in stepping out in that faith and leaning into one another, in the faith of my brothers, in the faith of my sisters, that you've given us eyes to see. And so as we go into this season looking, we want to see what you see. We pray your blessing on our day. Pray your blessing on our Christmas. We thank you for it all. In Jesus' name, amen.